Okay, good morning. Good morning, Patrik Schumacher, students, our faculty. It's really a thrill to welcome you, Patrik. I'll do a brief introduction. Patrik Schumacher is the principal and company director of Zaha Hadid Architects. You joined Zaha Hadid in 1988 and eventually became partner with the late Zaha. Alongside of your academic role, for over 2 decades, you were the founding director and co-directed for many years the A Design Research Lab, where we taught together for many, many years. You've taught also in other top schools, and I believe that the projects of your office represent a sustained and significant cultural force in architecture worldwide. So we're grateful for your generosity today to join us. This is the 3rd of 6 recorded sessions of presentations and interviews in this graduate seminar. We are researching with students pioneering technology and its impact on contemporary architectural practice. And the seminar course here at New York Institute of Technology explores 6 contemporary modes of practice and 6 projects working at the frontiers of design, production, and construction technology. And we focus on the architectural envelope as a mode of comparison of the use of technology through 6 exemplary buildings, all built within the last, say, 15 years. So the performance of architectural skins we understand as cultural and technical, experiential, thermal, etc., and evaluated across several thematic classifications, and those are materiality and massing, modularity, mass customization, form and geometry, which is the theme of today's session on focusing on Leeza Soho, completed in Beijing a couple of years ago. Other themes are climate and energy, visuality and experience, interaction and smartness. So the Leeza Soho project corresponds to our theme, form and geometry, with associated readings, and the students then do analytical diagrams, models, and will have an outcome of a book from these 6 projects. So the other projects are the O14 Tower, Taekwon Cultural Center by Herzog Demeron, Bloomberg Center by Morphosis, the Galleria City Center by UN Studio, and Mediatic by Cloud9. So thank you very much for joining us today, Patrik. We're grateful that you could really be here. It's a real thrill. The interview afterwards, or the questions as an informal sort of discussion, will be student-led. So I'll sort of stand back from that and jump in, with an opening. So I'll pass this over to you now. So thank you very much, Patrik Schumacher.
Thanks, Tom, for the introduction, and thanks, guys, for the interest in me, the building, the firm. And I will just make a relatively rapid presentation, but there's a number of points and materials to go through. I've surrounded the building, the main building we're looking at, with some antecedents and follow-up projects. I wasn't aware of the envelope focus, but again, there is a discussion of that as well. So let me try to share my screen to see where we are on that. But I need to go to the beginning. So now you can see already the overview. Wait. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, we're very proud of the building, and it got very good reviews. It's the biggest atrium in the world. There's fantastic experience on the inside, but also a very interesting envelope condition we're going to talk about. Start with this little flick. I mean, the atrium is unusual for an office building. I mean, we know Portman came up with a mega atrium for hotels, and also with that strong connection to the outside. We have done a number of atriums where we have distance to the outside, and that's also an important element. The element of the atrium is, of course, internal communication, intervisibility, but also the intervisibility with the exterior urban condition for people working within, but also inviting others to come in. The background is the client, so China, we've built up a track record with them with 3 major completed big projects in Beijing and Shanghai for them, and that was our 4th project. So that's why they also dare to go for a very unusual concept, namely of that big atrium. And we have glimpses of 3-dimensional, what Zaha used to call the space of flying, where you have things above, below, all around. In the exterior of a galaxy, where we also have our office, but also there, each of these volumes has its own atrium, of course, much smaller, but you can get already interesting effects over, if you go up to, 10, 6, 7, 8 floors, but this is also then continuing to the exterior atrium. So we also, in Hong Kong, we created this tower. Interesting because it has a series of undercuts and a series of cuts into it with balconies you can step out, but a number of atria. One major one, but totality of 4 atria in the design school, Hong Kong Polytechnic. And an interesting version in Moscow, Dominion Tower, where it's a smaller atrium, so there's more chance to occupy it. I'll come to this discussion how much we can occupy the Beijing atrium. There were limitations in fire and also worries about suicide and so on. Some of those discussions, but that's a major achievement, I thought. And some of the renderings and then anticipating, of course, that we can do the effects, the views, also from within, looking out. Dramatic piece, and then when it came up, it was a thrill to see. All the other buildings for the Soho were white, and I insisted on black with a big struggle. We wanted a different demeanor and a different departure, and then also what's important on the envelope is the shingling, the running of the windows that don't align vertically, and there's a lot of subtlety about the variation in the geometry on that. I will come to that. The structure with the bridge ties, which some of them could be occupied within and on top. Yeah, some of the vistas, when it came up, it became already was a thrill, the dynamism of that. And the tilting of the surface, it's first of all, the twist is motivated because we have an underground cut, which splits the building. And then we have a top alignment with the road axis. And that makes that twist less arbitrary, but also the surfaces, you then have more surfaces tilting towards you, and when you look down, you can also overlook more than a totally flat surface. So the location is in the south of Beijing, connected up to the airport, and we did the airport, and actually this will be the external, let's say, there's a transport hub right underneath which we were competing for, but we didn't get, where you can get check-in into for the airport, and there's a number of train lines, two crossing over and being represented at that very spot. So this motivates a very strong location. The cut, which is going through the whole site, with the train running through, so we're splitting the core and splitting the whole building in a way. Anyway, I don't want to go too much into detail, but there's the atrium also. Goes down a number of levels, connecting up with the train, and the top with helipad and solar, and the atrium roof atrium. The whole building, which is not so obvious when you look at it from the outside, is actually an oval or an elliptical form, elliptoid, rather than a circle. And the same, and you have this kind of a swelling and in both directions, which makes for a fully 3D curved facade set out. And some of the plans, and again the 2 lines, and the way the cores are located, the way the atrium is located with some of the escalators, and the way this proceeds and inflates, going up and then tightens again, going down. There's a lot of space. And the top floor is interesting. You can connect and have one tenant occupying, and that's where we had the opening party and so on. I mean, it's technically very complex, of course, like these large towers are. and I won't go into detail on that. But so we have the exterior and is that the black aluminum, but mostly glass, and the inside is also glass and black aluminum. So the shingle elements are one type of facade, and they flatten out as we approach that big cut, and that's where we have a very different facade, just a very clear big sheets of glass without emphasizing a frame or shingling. It flattens out totally at that point. Some of the geometry set out. Yeah. Usual thing, a 3D BIM model with M&E and structure integration. And then that model, and you can start to see the structure. You can start to integrate all the architectural, reintegrate all the architectural surfaces with the developed engineering. Construction, some of the mock-ups we generated to see the transparency of that big window. And it's important that we have two windows which align, so sometimes you can see right through the building. Otherwise, of course, wherever you have glass and you get this kind of, anyway, black expression because outside light is so much stronger than inside light. So, but if you have lining up, if you have two windows lined up, similarly with that image behind me in the back, then you can really get also exterior views into the space. And then, but the blackness of any window tied up with black framing meant that we have a more seamless surface, which we like. And some experiences are made also with other buildings where if you put a white frame on a window, they become too dominant. So there's a lot of these aesthetic experience decisions, but also at night, these views, the vista through is quite amazing, and the sense of viewing the inside of the space. At night, that's always usually, of course, given. You can see also the sense in the twilight where you get a glimpse of the inside, but only if you turn around and they align, you have that view through, and you get this fantastic sense. And when somebody walks down the bridge, they become kind of visible. Some of this reminded me, yeah, it's very plastic also. I think the curvature helps us to generate depth and plasticity, and then the shingling and the gradient of compression and relief also helps to accentuate, let's say, the form. You can see the way the shingles flatten out, and then they become quite deep at the opposite side of the transparent glass, and they're shifted. Every element is unique, and that's the challenge logistically and in terms of fabrication setup, but it works. I mean, the industry is ready for that. And you can see the way we embedded the mechanical floors quite subtly, and also in the depths of the shingle extrusion, there's an element of ventilation possibilities. This is the image I currently have at the background of my Facebook. The sun kind of breaks through the gap, and at the same time you get a lot of reflection. I mean, it's an interesting, and some of these views are interesting with the way color plays with the sky being reflected, and I don't know where that orange comes from. That's photography, and of course the inside is also quite dramatic, and you can get interesting views up and down. I mean, the building wasn't occupied yet so much, so you don't get that sense of liveliness, but you get a few views later on where you see across the gap, you see into other offices and so on, other spaces. And again, yeah, it worked out very well. I think the lightness and transparency of those mega windows given that, you know, it's quite high, it's 200-meter tall, the tallest atrium, to get a lot of wind loads there. This is some of my own shots. The way you get a sense of what's going on, if there's activity in the various floors across the atrium. And the view down. You can see that you get quite a series of floors where you get vistas. And I think that's very important. At the same time, the vista across. I mean, I said earlier, I wished we had schemes where you also had deeper ledges and step out and exterior balconies into it, but there were worries. I mean, I can imagine, I understand to some extent, something like this could be an attraction. I mean, for suicide. So these fantasies, worries came up that you throw things or you throw yourself, and there's a lot of stress maybe also in China office world. So there was something where I was hoping to have more, let's say, exterior occupation capacities. The other thing's fine. This is the 5G kind of lab which we interiored also. So let's leave you one more time with the video. Then I'll show you a few other follow-up projects. Sometimes you don't know if you're looking up or down in these kind of takes. And yeah, I think the facade is very elaborate. I mean, it was a big, let's say, effort on our part, on the contractor's part, but it's very sophisticated example, I think, of a parametrically beautifully varied, intricate facade, which integrates these two different conditions. So yeah, where this comes from, I mean, Mega Atrium was, you know, I've been a huge fan of John Portman, and I've been visiting the Marriott in New York a number of times. And that was known. I became the first John Portman professor at Harvard. I met the old man and had sessions with him, and I sketched a number of those. This was before we did Leeza. It was all at the same time, roughly, that unbelievable sketch for Hyundai. In the end, they went for wanting to compete with the other conglomerates to make the tallest tower in Seoul. I thought this would have been a better version. So that was is a dream. But we also did this sketch for Taikang. It's a conglomerate as well. And for conglomerates, is interesting. You could have all the different companies gathered and have externals as well, and you get an interior urbanism going with retail elements, and you know, also again this idea of bridges more dramatically, and the top skylight as well, which Leeza has as well, of course. This one didn't have these big side openings, but has a bigger full-on skylight and a number of lower side cuts. And we did few of those. A cluster tower that was for the Bank of China at Shenzhen, with also, you know, exterior terraces, and one tower stops at that point, the skylight, and the hotel starts. I mean, these buildings are interesting. They become little urban districts nearly, potentially, and I'll show you later the latest one we're doing. This Opus has also an interest. It's actually, there's an atrium here, and you can see right through the courtyard and back into the, see what to the top there. That's the hotel lobby at that point, but this is a mixed use, so it's offices, hotel, residences in there, retail. And we're doing at the moment under construction in Moscow a big technology center, and again several atria, but a major central one. And I want to show that as well because it has a series. It has these kind of sliver atria and a series of bridge spaces. And again, the combination of not having the atrium a totally interior event, but being also a place where you can look out. Panoramic elevators draw you up, and then you see the bridges above. And these are some of my snapshots where you're moving up in the elevator, which is very clear glass, with this kind of prismatic, and you see the different spaces you're passing through, which are launched, the restaurant, the breakfast room, are the major suspended spaces in that, and a kind of hangout bar gallery area as well. So there's 3 of these suspended balconies in there. That's the breakfast room, the elevator, and the structure allows for that hollowing out as well. There's also two cores split up. And not in the atrium is only continuous at these kind of elevator slivers. But I think it's quite interesting, quite dramatic, and the views both looking through the building, back at itself, into the urban environment as well. And we currently working on Oppo, which is a major telecommunication company in Shenzhen. So that's the corporate headquarters. And that is also interesting. I mean, the Leeza is for many smaller companies, like they usually have a small home office kind of concept with a lot of smaller firms, more like startup companies, smaller companies. And this is a major corporate. So we have these cluster of towers pulling out some of the elevators into one, but then also having this scooped atrium, which is quite large also. So it doesn't need to be 200 meters. I mean, 40, 50 meters also dramatic. And on the inside, you feel heights, I think, often quite a bit more dramatic than on the exterior. So that is what we're doing with Oppo, and you can see this kind of idea, the Rogers idea, pulling away the core to the sides, and then having great top of tower experience. And the last one, we just one so-called Tower C. It's a twin tower. Had a lot of, I mean, this is a little urban district again, a lot of integration with the underground as well, with the parkscape, and trying to make sort of retail terraces rather than a retail kind of interior mall, but also, you know, retail means that often, of course, food and beverages, a social activation, and then another connection up, it's a mixed use tower, mostly offices and retail, at this kind of bridge level as well, some interesting double and triple height spaces. So some of these views, and we had two versions. One was more moderate, and they in China they go for the kill. I mean, and we also with Leeza, they trusted us that we could deliver a project like this. A lot of interesting views again, and the integration with the urban landscape. This is an underground space where we putting these kind of cone-like skylots on top. So this really goes down a number of levels and has this urban activation integration, quite a few levels up here, and then again in the bridge. So it's quite a complex dramatic thing, and we won it, and we're under contract and starting. You know, the road goes through, as well as mall spaces, bridge space, top of tower, and yeah. So I leave you with that final image. And this is the way we can say so. This initially was a rendering which nobody believed it's real, and I think the other projects underway we are confident. So I'm ready for questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Patrik. What a visual onslaught. That's thoroughly satiating this early in the morning. The questions as a sort of informal interview will be led by the students. So I'll hand it over to Sohe No, Adam Giannios, and Aditi Pancholi.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for this very insightful presentation, Mr. Schumacher. It was really wonderful. And thank you for giving us your time today. It's an honor to have this conversation with you. To dive into the questions, the first one that I have is about the atrium. So by the historical and etymological definitions, an atrium is an open-roofed entrance hall. Through a historical lens charting the trajectory of interior urbanism, the atrium effect is characterized by features as open terraces, exemplified by the Bonaventure Hotel and several other John Portman hotel projects on the Ford Foundation in New York. Leeza Soho project currently houses the largest atrium in the world. So can you please share with us how your client supported the inclusion of this vast atrium in the design brief? And can you also discuss the legacies and further potentials of John Portman's atrium project through Leeza Soho project? And was the atrium the outcome of the direct impact of any contextual or specific programmatic requirements for this project?
No, well, the atrium was was not something which was originally required, but I just, because it was quite close to the CEO and owner of Soho China, I mean, particularly Sanxing, but also Mr. Pan, I convinced him that this could be something which would be make this building attractive and would be doable. So it was. I was looking for a project, and that's why you saw other sketches, to in a way sell this idea to clients on a different scale, to go, you know, to not apply it to a hotel. I mean, I love the Portman concept, and you know, but a lot of the atrium is hotel rooms, so you basically have closed walls. You step out, and it's nice when you step out and you can orient yourself. But I thought it would be a great thing for offices, because I'm into intervisibility, intercommunication, corporates in particular, but also for something where like a startup cluster like Soho is usually doing this. So you have inter-awareness, intervisibility, and communication. And it's also just a thrill to destination. And so, as I said earlier, I think it is successful and it worked. I think it's a thrill to experience, and you get some of that sense of avoiding that sense where you come into the tower, where you only have the lobby and then everybody disappears into elevator corridors, rooms, and to experience also on the floor more openness and across floors. And I think that works quite well. As I said, my where we were in the sense not as successful as we wanted to be is to have more actually occupation of the atrium, maybe more utilization and projecting surfaces out into that, and having some of the circulation in the atrium, and maybe even more occupational spaces. So that's something we are facing now again with and that with corporates, you can, if they're not too huge, you can also obviously take the glass away and have open communication across levels. But then it quite quickly we run into fire issues. So we have special communication with engineers. What special devices and engineering? You can't do it with code. You have to have engineered solution, a special solution managing that. And that's what we're working on. So it's a long-term project to make these atria more and more open and more occupiable with activities. You also need to then control what the occupation is, that it doesn't become a source of fire, etc. So, but in this case, it was actually also this idea of suicide, which I think might be unique. Maybe it's some, the Soho people, or it's China, or but we have to be mindful. So that this isn't something which is just a matter of design. It's health and safety regulations and these kind of challenges, which let's say still some nuts to crack to bring that vision to full flourishment.
Thank you so much for that. Over to Sohi.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sohi. No. First of all, thank you for your amazing presentation and joining us. For our question, as far as we understand, the Beijing is a climatically challenging context with the hot, dry summer condition and extremely cold winters. So in general, how does the climatic context affect the urban development in Beijing? And then we know that the project has a LEED Gold certification and China 2-star green building rating. So to what extent did the Beijing severe climate drive the design of the tower?
Well, yes. So I think one thing one has to, which I learned already, decades ago, is that sometimes these atriums are quite useful as a buffer, and you can, I mean, this is not a heated space, and you can catch, you can lighten up the interior facades, for instance, there, and you can capture some also energy. But in terms of the sun exposure management, so we have some of the glass in the office is dark, so you get a bit of effect there. There might be a slight effect in terms of the shingling, but I don't know. It's mostly not strong effect. Where we have the full openness, we do get that's where we don't have a tempered space. So we don't have a big problem there. But we were going for full visibility. And that means also that the next layer on the inside could be full transparent, rather than the kind of darkened condition. So I think this way it helps, and I think it works on that level. But it wasn't. I mean, the idea I would try to do everywhere. Let's say in an urban condition where we believe that we should have interior urbanism, where we should have porosity and opening up buildings on the inside, within and to the outside. So, so I can give you a full detailed account of the particulars. I mean, the orientation was not driven by Climatic, because it was driven by the two parameters of an urban grid and the diagonal trajectory of the train.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Over to Aditi.
Yeah. So the next question that I have is that in our seminar, we are looking at 6 different build projects analyzed in relation to 6 different themes. This week's theme is form and geometry. So with the Leeza Soho building exemplifying this topic, I'm going to ask that the Leeza project makes a substantial contribution to innovating on the typology of high-rise towers, challenging the segmentation and serial repetition through the formal expression of the interior atrium and resulting into different mass. So how does geometry play important role in this? And also, what stand does Leeza Soho take in terms of its status as an architectural icon, especially within the context of Chinese urbanization?
Thanks. I mean, yeah. I mean, well, the iconicity is, let's say, to some extent, we worked with an option actually where we subdued it even more. It's quite kind of relatively subtle piece. I mean, it has a certain, even a kind of sense of minimalism nearly on the outside. Of course, it has these subtle gradients in all directions, and it's quite elegant, and it's also the ambition of Soho to become more sophisticated and and upgrade its product. But we also, there was worries. I mean, we had at one point there was a worry that this, in the renderings, this cut becomes too dramatic, and you have this whole China backlash against this kind of Chichi-Guagua extreme forms of architecture. And I also speculate with the idea, why don't we run the shingles across the whole thing and let this kind of be more neutral, and you just let the light pour through. When we tried it in India, and I thought it was a good decision to, we also from the view, it would have been became too heavy. So we went for it, but I think it's still quite subtle exterior wise. So when it comes to it's less dramatic than some of our other buildings, and I quite like that. And of course, it becomes quite dramatic on the inside, but that's different. That's not something I would say which which would be objectionable. I mean, I understand where the Chinese coming from, and I have been always critical also of this. If you have a cluster of competing icons which go all in into different direction, you get quite quickly in a kind of urban chaos. So in this sense, I'm happy with the expression of that. I mean, in terms of the geometry, as I said, we're quite subtle. It's also exploiting the site conditions to the fullest. We have retail on the ground and sunken around it. So we actually are having a smaller footprint. Then we're swelling up, and then we're pulling back in. But the geometry is very subtle with the oval or ellipsoid form in both directions. And what I noticed, and I noticed in another building I saw incidentally in Nanjing, this shingling helps actually to make, these are all flat surfaces, and the radius sometimes gets relatively tight. And I've noticed always that yes, if you have a very shallow curvature, you can get a fully smooth and curved feeling with a flat panel, like in vitro, for instance. Whether it's the concrete panel or the glass, you think it's a curve. But when it's tighter and you use flat facets, it starts to look like kind of not what you wanted, you intended, a compromise. So when I noticed through some examples that the shingling helps a lot, it makes it more deliberate, and the curve flows better. Anyway, it's not a kind of corrupted and, let's say, cheap instantiation of an intended curve. It becomes more elegant and deliberate. So that's why we went for the shingle. Clearly, because otherwise we would have, these facets would have been too crude, and you would have to get these sense of breaking the reflection. But anyway, if you have a shingle, you're breaking anyway. And so that's where this comes from. I think it was very successful. And there's also something about this, with the shifting of the verticals, you get more of a surface feeling and less in like a fish skin instead of a gridded articulation. So we were quite happy with that. The intent to make it more seamless, and it's quite interesting how slick it views from some views. And I always like relief. I went back to, for instance, our Shanghai Soho, where we used, I mean, that's something that's also old. When Foster came up with these, we were once proud to suppress totally mullions and have flat surfaces, flat glass surfaces. But I think it's a mistake, because you don't get changefulness when you look along the facade or flat onto it, and deviations become very troubling. And you realize that, and it's as similar as you can't actually make a flat plaster wall, a huge plaster wall. It's just, this always falls. And you realize why there was relief in traditional architecture and how it helps. So the mistake of what we did there, we are very unhappy with the curtain wall, the flat curtain wall of a large expanse. This is something I learned, and I wanted to, and the shingling also give reliefs to the project. And now wherever we're going, we find ways of relieving the project, giving depths. So it also gets much more observer in a camera movement or observer movement changefulness when you facade closes and opens. And so that's some of those things where I always, you need sometimes, and the same I said with the black mullions when the aquatic center, I mean, it's really we put silver aluminum mullions, and the grid becomes far too strong. And so sometimes you just shamefully have to waste whole buildings and to learn and have a better product several buildings down the road. And maybe one could have, I mean, I'm very observant when I walk around and when I see other buildings. So I'm not only learning from my own building, like I said, the Nanjing building, I was learning from many others, but still sometimes some of those details slip or happen, and and maybe I wasn't there when the mock-up was there, but in the mock-up you can't see it. If you look at a mock-up and you see right through it, you don't get that contrast between a kind of more black feeling of the facade and the white mullion, etc. So anyway, I leave it with that kind of learning curve.
Thank you so much for that answer. Over to Adam.
Hello from me too. Thank you very much for taking this time and for an amazing presentation. So after the inspiring and very interesting approach that we saw in the short movie that you and Rosie Chan had created about setting a parametric architectural imagery to music regarding the impact of parametric design upon building design, you talked in the Wallpaper magazine about a paradigmatic sequence of animations. Can you please explain this concept and methodological approach and how it can be understood through maybe the design of Leeza Soho? Thank you.
Well, these animations, they stand at the beginning of parameter scenario, and they're quite old from the office and from the ADOL, some of them actually. So, and well, I mean, this is what is expressed there is the, first of all, variation, differentiation in the pursuit of adaptation of elements to landscape, or in this of urban elements or facade elements to an envelope geometry which required them to adapt. I mean, some of this is an early kind of tool which allowed that. Some of that was so-called generative components by Robert Eich for micro. Forgot now the Bentley, where that concept became very clear, and it was of course in parallel developed with developing of this paradigm. And but I think the next step for me is important also is that this is not only a single system which modulates itself to conditions, and then also there are also thresholds where where it kind of migrates into very different condition, like in here from the facade of the office area and the facade of the atrium, and you still try to transition somehow blend, but there are thresholds. It's not an even gradient. But then there also there is system layered of systems which correlate. So one differentiation feeds off another, or represents, or is transcoding another. That's another important aspect you get. So it's not so evident in Leeza, but you do have, because for instance, the structure isn't strongly expressed, for instance, which would be another. And there is diagrams that show the way the structure kind of flows, but that's not coming through. And sometimes you also have to make choices like this. As you see, the Macau project has a very strong expression of the structure, and the structure is pliable and it adapts to the kind of geometry. And then there's a secondary, let's say, facade tessellation, which fills in and ties in with that structure. I mean, we have another tower I could mention, the Miami Tower, where we have where this kind of system integration is like between the structure and the apartment decomposition and layout. So we're moving from a kind of 3 apartments per floor to 2 to 1 per floor, and that flows together with the structure, and then you get different balcony conditions, and they're kind of also, but they're not abrupt. They migrate where the corner balconies shrink while the central balconies increases, and at the top there emerges a column split where a window increases, and but it correlates with different interior products. And so for me, it's important that these variations, they on the one hand recognize the variation of forces to much more accumulate to the bottom of the tower, need of, more bracing and stronger elements and become more filigree, but also that differentiation could then be picked up by the functional distribution of different types of products and spaces. And that's more of a general theory. Now, these things come more to their fullest flourishing if you had more mixed use and more interoperating visible systems than you have in Leeza. So in Leeza, it's still a kind of relatively simple single system, single function condition, but still it makes sense to have that differentiation.
Thank you. That was a great answer. We had already prepared another question for the complex curvature of the facade and atrium facade surfaces, but that you already answered, and thank you for that. So we'll continue with Sohi.
So as we all know, we have been adapting to the pandemic situation for about a year. So in which ways do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic will impact our work environments in the long term? And in your view, how does the Leeza Soho forecast intensely network office as a safe environment in terms of the public health? What were the main considerations that were important while laying out the vertical array of the floor plan? And how did the corporate work culture drive the design of the building?
Yes, I mean, that's been a theme for many years for me. And as I said, it's communication, intervisibility, inter-awareness. Why do you bring thousands of people into one center, into one building? It's in the exchange of information, mutual inspiration, finding collaborative entities. And that's the way, the contemporary work environment is. It's project-based. You have to find new partners within the office, across office, every few weeks nearly, depending on that, and everybody becomes potentially creative. So I mean, this technological civilization has I would argue, infinite ability to absorb innovations, very different from 50 years ago, where the kind of mechanical mass production systems couldn't absorb many innovations because it would mean that you have to rebuild a whole assembly line. And therefore you had only a few, design development departments, very few, and then the innovations would have to be kind of measured. So you can kind of readjust maybe the assembly line, and that means you can make maybe a new version of the cornflakes, or something like that. But now you have 3D printing, robotic fabrication, the reprogramming of the robotic production systems, and you have software as service and the uploadability. Any innovation can instantly upload it to billions of people when it is through an app, through a software, but also products potentially. So that changes everything, and that means also this idea that you're working on something different and new with new partners. So it's been interesting that, of course, the telecommunication has been growing, but face-to-face had been growing. Face-to-face has temporarily kind of, been killed, but I think it will come back. And it's not only this, the work, but it's also social life in the city. So I'm sitting here in London in Shoreditch, which Tom knows very well. He had his office is located here at one point. And while nobody was working in the summer, everybody was out and about. I mean, the clubs, the bars, it was humming, and all through night. So the nightlife was. So there's also this desire, and you also need that to intercommunicate culturally. I mean, the pub opposite the office is that's where the discourse continues. You need to be in an urban center. So I believe in urban concentration, but I believe that some of us will stay maybe more remote. Maybe the older generations will not come in so much, and you will free up some space on the inside where you can have more residences, more mixed use, and you have less commuting burden perhaps through that when people come only twice a week or not, and some move out. then you could have walkability, and you hopefully have less traffic, which I hope anyway. Micromobility, cycling, walking, active traveling. So that's my vision. But the other thing I'm working on very strongly is that I believe in terms of telecommunication, it's going to be it's the advent of cyberspace. So there's an enormous amount of investment flowing into virtual event tools. You know, the technology transfer in the gaming industry. There's a lot of startup companies for virtual conferencing, virtual exhibitions, virtual everything. And we're working also on that because some of our clients, all of our clients need that. And I think that could be a lot of the buildings we're creating now for also startup clusters and so on, and corporates. We have anyway full 3D models. We do VR models of most of them anyway. So we're saying, why not start using those and allow the staff and clients and everybody to roam around as avatars in them. And so that's what I'm working right now. So I believe some of that will happen as well. So I think if telecommunication and virtual communication, it moves away from the paradigm of, let's say, the magazine and the graphics into something more. And I've tried some of them. I mean, they start to become kind of, and even after a few minutes trying, it's feasible, viable. You know, there's teething problems, of course. So I believe that will be part, and then but we shouldn't do that all at home. There will be, some of us will be gathering in on-site, and then we will have virtual connecting in. I don't believe we're all going to be separate, but we will have in our central office spaces, you know, video walls and maybe panoramic projections of a virtual space in which other locations join and remote individuals join. So I'm working actively on that and exploring. There's a lot of technology coming in, how you represent. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, there's robots roaming around which project a tailored presence. I mean, all the major companies are working on this, whether it's Tencent and Facebook and Microsoft and Google. So it's a big area. I don't think it, but I think the way, I do believe this collective joining in virtual gatherings, and it's not everybody from home. So that's why I believe that architecture, well, we as architects should, you know, design these, and they should be integrally designed with the physical spaces, so that these virtual spaces are real in terms of spatial visual language, iconography and semiology, continuations, and also spatially direct continuation of the real. So I believe that. And again, I believe that the city clusters, the inner city productive hubs and clusters, I think they will become more pleasant and slightly younger, I guess, in terms of the crowds and interesting places. So I'm quite happy. You know, I'm not going to move out of Shoreditch. I stay right in the center of London.
Thank you so much for all your answers. Adam will give our last question.
Thank you, Sophie. So in the past 2 decades, the portfolio of Zaha Hadid architects includes a variety of tower projects, like some of them you showed us already, including office towers, residential and hotel projects in contexts around the world. In which way does the Leeza Soho project seem distinct and different when compared to previous Zaha Hadid architects' tower designs? And what interests have been carried from project to project? Also, how has the Leeza Soho project influenced other projects designed since Leeza? And finally, how do you believe this project may influence current or future Zaha Hadid architect projects?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's a milestone. I mean, it's embedded in a series of projects with the client, but also with other attempts I've been showing. It's a little bit, the lecture was already geared to a bit to that. I think what I'm looking for, as I said, some of these other projects to make that atrium even more kind of interesting, not just this one fantastic swoop. And you could have that at some glimpses and still have other things projecting in with bridges and so on. And I think the other thing which project which runs in parallels, which I think should be synthesized, it's a little bit synthesized in the Macau project, which I showed, is the structural, bringing forward the structure more explicitly, and also maybe circulation, and to see the subsystems more articulated. It's nearly a kind of hyper malleable and version of something which Rogers tried to do with something of Lloyd's or his fantastic new tower in London. I mean, it doesn't have an atrium, but Lloyd's had. But this is a kind of, you know, more seamless, more variation. So that's what I hope we achieve. So it's hard, because what I've learned, and also, for instance, to have more depth in the facade with brise-soleil. What I've learned and more variation there, and recognition of overshadowing, hollowing out maybe brise-soleil elements, shading elements. So we have made, and also, yeah, you know, I'm working with AID on a lot of these topics. A recent studio with high-rise buildings where we also differentiate, you know, materialities, concrete, steel, timber, maybe in one structure which is mixed use. You can see these projects which, instead of having a single element like Oppo, we're having a cluster of them. Now this Tower C, twin towers, bridges. I mean, there's not that mega atrium there, or smaller ones, but I'm looking for opportunities where we can synthesize more. So where we do also urban projects. We're doing now, you know, so-called unicorn incubator cluster in Chongqing and Chengdu, where we vary across a number of buildings. This is the opportunities I'm looking for, and even have multiple authors coming together. So a little bit an urban district, you know, because this great urban window, it would be great if there was a few other buildings which had other windows, and that the bridge also spins over. That's the vision of a 3D 21st century urban cluster with also multiple activations at higher levels. That's something we can develop with the students initially, but then would also bring forward, you know, the structural expression, which makes and as well as facade, shading, etc. And oftentimes, what I realized, although we've done a number of skeletons now, it's cost still. I mean, it's, yeah, as well as with the shading articulation, the depth of the facade, it's costly. It serves running costs, structurally optimized structure is also materially light and optimized, but costs are still a difficult burden to overcome with these kind of projects. So that's why we can't have everything in in every project, and you need to step back and look also at all our works. Of course, every single one of them has, you know, lost ambitions, compromises, you know, deserves criticism, not only with what we did, but what was possible. But what is nice about the overall panorama of projects, one can imagine how the best ingredients and innovations of the various projects, one would create this kind of super project. And I think we'll get there. We'll move towards that. I think the industry also has to evolve a little bit further in terms of gearing up with respect to file to factory fabrication, maybe also robotic construction to some extent, with welding on site, and many of these issues where the element of the economic element, I think it's coming, because in the end the material savings are projected, and you substitute information and computation and intelligence, and as that spreads, that becomes cheaper respectively than the physical. In the end, there's very difficult to make unless we find a new energy source, for instance, or new kind of easy accessible steel, mines. That's where the constraint is, and where less constraint is in terms of information, intelligence, computation. So we can substitute that for the material effort, then these super refined and optimized structures and facades will be, in the end, particular in terms of the running costs, if they're folded in, compelling, as well as I think they're more eloquent and beautiful and light. So that's what I'm hoping for. That there's still a long way to go, and it's important that there is academic institutions who are supporting this effort intellectually, and then that the industry is also pulled along.
Thank you so much. Professor Verebes can take over here.
Professor, you're muted.
Yes, I am muted. Thank you, Patrik, and thank you, students, for leading the discussion. Such incredible insights, really, on the building itself of Leeza Soho, but really its relation to a trajectory in the office from several projects before for Soho and other clients, but also since then, a series of projects which I haven't seen published yet, and it's really quite interesting to see. Maybe just to sort of wrap up a little bit, the questions were, of course, comprehensive, but I have one more. The project makes so many advancements and innovations, either in more generally in terms of the architectural culture and in a contemporary sense, and in that sense, a little bit more deeply on the possible breaks with previous trajectories, tendencies, and modes of expression in the office. Not only is it the largest atrium ever built, but I think there's also a break in some sense about the appearance, maybe not entirely true, but possibly a duplicitous appearance of simplicity from a distance. That's helped by the blackness of the building. And in a formal and geometric sense, there's also, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, a little bit about of departure from an embracing of continuity as a sort of default condition. There's certain structural expressions about the atrium where you see the structural elements, and there are instances of what we could say is mathematical events, shifts from concave to convex, that are in fact moments of quite extreme, discrete transitions in geometry, as a kind of integration and of structure and surface and such. And it's that's, to me, I find difficult to find as a earlier trajectory, and seems to be quite instantiated and new proposition in this project. Is that something which you find carrying on in other projects, this shift maybe from continuity to certain mathematical events caused by an integration or expression of structure?
Yes, well, first of all, thanks for the observation and a kind of keen eye on some of these details, these crease lines and the shift from convex to concave. Yes, I think these are important elements in the aesthetic and the overall sense of muteness, nearly, I mean, or subtleness in the expression. I think, yes, we all love that and appreciate that, and that inspires us also going forward with other works we have. And we have also in the office, multiple cultures nearly. I mean, they are connected, and I'm connected up with all of them, and that's nice also in terms of there's some characters and clusters of people who are following the path of refinement and subtlety and rationality, and others who are further pushing the spectacular, and others, you know, and it's important also. And then of course we have those who are very much in the what I now call the kind of tectonism paradigm, which I think is very important, but very tough to deliver in terms of the integration of sophisticated engineering knowledges and tools and morphologies driven by structural engineering, environmental engineering, and new fabrication logics, and what comes out of this through the research group, and that's migrating out into smaller projects and some larger projects also. So there's slightly different trajectories, and I think they're useful. Like, and they can also observe each other and learn from each other, and can be hybridized at certain points. So that's quite nice. And it's a large firm, and we have now quite a series of mature designers, always young blood coming in. And it's true what you're saying, Tom. And there isn't a kind of singular conscious, let's say, but what I agree with that what I was looking for a number of times is that there is not a single game of continuity across everything, and that sometimes a threshold, a break, accentuates something and announces an event, and is yet integrated. If that's not too many of them, then is actually enhancing the experience. It's not a one-liner. In that sense, yes, I think that's nice. And we always, we on the one hand in this game of seeking refined mastery over what we're doing within a kind of intentionality which we have developed. And then on the other hand, where we're also exploring new sensations and trajectories. So it's this kind of, because we still want to be and feel ourselves, because we're connected to academic realms and in kind of an avant-garde condition and a research condition. Yet at the same time, we have to deliver on a large scale, and also want that sense of mastery through which we achieve when we do project lineages, and on the other hand, we also make these kind of breakouts. I don't know where Leeza stands there. I mean, it's within the lineage, but also sets a new accentuation. As I said, my own vision is that to have, let's say, I mean, that's something I've recently posted on Facebook. You can look at it. And I'm working also on that book on tectonism. That's why it's again strong in my mind. It's that vision of tectonism, which Leeza isn't yet fully integrated with, which is for me the next stage. But it is fitted best to what I said earlier, to also a project task which is more complex, mixed use, and with more systems at play than in this particular project. But again, what I do believe is that each project, it's important that it doesn't become visually overcrowding, trying to do many things at the same time. And I compare it sometimes to I mean, you oftentimes when you think in terms of a theoretical paper or something, or even a kind of political statement, there are primary headlines and secondary and tertiary, and you need to hierarchize also. The building shouldn't be an onslaught. It has a primary message which you take in, and then you're revealing other layers as you come in. The same when you do an exhibition design. So that's where this kind of toning down and suppressing temporarily also details. So and then to accentuate a few things, I believe that we have to kind of reflect the also our kind of cognitive capacity to grasp an object, a space, and we need to we can't do this kind of over agitated onslaught. Let's say that is was the major fallback of deconstructivism. That was not viable to the extent where, you know, when we reflect that trajectory, it became so chaotic that you actually can't even find yourself in your own drawing. You go away and for coffee and you come back and don't know where you should continue your drawing. So if you get lost in your own drawing, it means there's probably all is lost for end user navigation also. So that's that speaks, let's say, for, I mean, simplicity has been a value in architecture for thousands of years, and it's also a value in science and in writing. I mean, but it comes with a twist. It can't be oversimplified. It needs to be a kind of, so it is a value, and there's a there are other values. Complexity is another one. But this is more to do with the you know, if the complex of, if life becomes more complex, it has to come through as well, but not in one onslaught.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think the building does absolutely delay the surprise and from the exteriority to the interior, and it saves that sensation. Spectacular kind of experiences of the building are in delay, and I think that represents in some ways I think a quite mature, controlled sense of curation of an experience, from great distance to proximity, from exterior to interior. I'd really like to thank you so genuinely and you know, for your graciousness, your generosity, for joining us today. We are, you know, broadcast live on Facebook, so our audience will be bigger and enduring. And I really, you know, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. Thank you to the students and to Sue for enabling us. I hope we get to see you sometime soon, once our world returns a little bit to some semblance of normalcy.
Hopefully this year. Let's see.
This year.
Thank you also, Patrik. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good conversation. Thanks for the questions, guys.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations for the great work. Yeah.
Thank you.